Welcome into the Hard Count. It is Thursday, January 23rd, 2025. Have not said the wrong year yet. Got a good streak going. Going to try to keep that rolling. Glad to have y'all dialed in. Have a ton to jump into. I went to the Twitter sphere, asked y'all for input as to a takeaway that you have from this past college football season that will shape how you view the 2025 season. Have takes on the SEC being up for grabs. Going to take an exit meeting with Tennessee. But I want to start with this because a lot of y'all brought this same take to the table, whether you mentioned this team explicitly or not. In 2025, can you buy a national championship? 2025 and beyond is maybe a better way to say it. And the reason why this dialogue is happening is because Ohio State allegedly spends $20 million in one offseason to get their roster they have for this national title run. They win the national title. And so everyone's saying, yeah, but they bought that national title. So this segment, it's kind of framed towards Ohio State. But really, I mean, if you're a Florida fan, you're a Miami fan, you're an Arkansas fan, you're a Michigan fan, whoever you're a fan of, this is sort of an all-encompassing discussion for us to have as to the current state and future of college football. Let's reframe this. Everyone is saying after this national championship, not everyone, a lot of people are saying that Ryan Day and Ohio State, the reason why they won the national championship is because they had more money and they bought themselves a national title. And to some degree, I think this is maybe some copium. Like what we say on this show is like bitter people do bitter things. Like if you're upset about Ohio State winning the national championship and you're a Big Ten opponent and you don't think they should have done it, like I can't help you. What happened on the field happened on the field. But there's another portion, I think, of the college football public that genuinely feels this way of, hey, this is not okay where you can have more money than everybody else, put together that roster. That makes that national title, to us at least, speaking from their perspective, that makes it invalid. So let's rehearse what the facts are here when it comes to Ohio State and what their roster was made up of. Because anytime you mention a school's NIL budget and how much a roster cost, typically that is very closely correlated to what that school did in the transfer portal. Now, Ohio State, they went to the portal. No way around that. Took right around 8 guys. Really, though, there was 4 major portal players that Ohio State grabbed. It was Will Howard, it was Caleb Downs, it was Quinshon Judkins, and it was Seth McLaughlin, the offensive lineman from Alabama, who was hurt for the playoff run. So 3 that made the most massive impact on what they did in the postseason. The curious part about this to me as we discuss the folks that are upset about how much money Ohio State allegedly spent on their roster is the amount that Ohio State spent to keep a lot of these guys home, I would have to believe is probably a much larger portion than whatever they spent in the transfer portal. Like keep it a Tuimoloau, a Sawyer, a Cody Simon, a Henderson, all those guys that we've mentioned ad nauseum now that chose to come back to Ohio State. Wasn't that always one of the major pros of NIL when this whole thing started? Wasn't that always the thing that people were standing on saying this is why this is going to help college sports in the future? You're going to keep guys from going professional, maybe before they're a first-round pick, have them stay in school for another year. That's good for college sports, right? But now we're in a point where Ohio State did that at a really high level, kept elite dudes on campus for another year before going pro, and we're all saying, I say not all of us, but a lot of people are now saying, Ohio State just bought them, just bought that roster, more money, less problems, more national championships. Like that doesn't compute to me. You can't sit here and say how much of an issue the NIL world is, and then also say it's a good thing for guys to come back because of NIL. Like those two things don't compute. Here's the other part of this. If it hadn't worked, and in cases where it hasn't worked in the past, because Ohio State, they spent a lot of money allegedly, other schools definitely across college football have spent a lot of money as well. Whenever it doesn't work and the NIL situation seems to blow up in a school's face, a lot of people are very quick to point out and say, see, bad culture, see, poor coaching. Hey, they didn't know how to evaluate in the portal and get the right guys. Like Ohio State now, because they had success with the way they used NIL and the way they put together this roster, nobody wants to give credit to Ryan Day or to the powers that be around Ohio State that kept these dudes here and that evaluated what they evaluated in the portal and going and grabbing Will Howard. Now, Will Howard, when he was in the transfer portal, there was a lot of people from Big 12 country and alike saying, I don't know if he's really an upgrade for you. He might just kind of be Kyle McCord 2.0. I don't know. He wasn't really all that great at Kansas State is what some folks were saying. And obviously now as he sits here today with a national title ring on his finger, that was in fact incorrect. So it's a roundabout way for me to tell you, Ohio State, you have to give them credit to some part of this. Like when you talk about how much money a school had, I get it and I understand where you're coming from, but money doesn't make the play when the lights are on for you. It might get your guy in the student directory. That's nice. But like Will Howard throwing that dime at the end of the game to Jeremiah Smith, who, again, I'm sure wasn't a free 99 acquisition, that wasn't because of NIL. That's because of what they had bought into all year long when it comes to that offense. I'm sure thousands, if not millions of minutes they spent behind closed doors throwing the ball around. Like, there was a lot that went into that had nothing to do with NIL. Like, again, getting guys on your roster is great, but having them actually execute and play together and have it all work correctly, that to me is the real value here of what Ohio State did. $20 million is great. And I'm not telling you it didn't play a factor, but is this really new for us to talk about resources when it comes to acquiring talent? To me, all that I can gauge is Ohio State just was intelligent in the way that they allocated their resources towards actually acquiring players. But like, we've always been in the business in college football when it comes to spending money, millions of dollars, spending millions of monies, if you will, to bring top talent to your school, right? Like, look at the facilities that we have in college football. I mean, a facelift for Florida's facility, $85 million. Missouri upgraded their facility, $30 million. Clemson, $55 million facility, with them facelifting that whole operation. We've always been in the business of spending a lot of money to try and attract top talent. The world we live in now, though, is such that you can take some of that money you would have spent to buy a nice waterfall for your weight room or for your team room or for whatever, and now you can go grab yourself a top safety, a top quarterback, keep maybe some of those top defensive linemen that thought about going pro for another year on your campus. That's the value here for Ohio State. So as we look to the future, I don't know that this isn't just going to be maybe the price of admission for future national championships. Like, we look at some of these previous national champions pre-NIL era. How much would it have been to have the 2004 USC roster? Now, the jokes will fly because I used that school first in the whole Reggie Bush deal. He got his Heisman back. 2021 Georgia. Like, how stacked that defense was. The records they set. You don't think that defense might have cost a pretty penny in the NIL era to have on your campus consistently? Those old Bama teams. This is going to be the world we live in going forward. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw $20 million for future national title rosters be the lower going rate. Like, I genuinely believe that as we move forward here in the modern era of NIL and the portal and all of that, having $20 million, as people make a big deal about this now, and Ryan Day buying his roster, quote unquote, to me, that's nonsense. Give Ryan Day credit, give Ohio State credit, and give them credit also for how they made it all work together. So if you have issues with Ohio State allocating resources in an intelligent fashion and having good cohesion from the staff to the powers that be to the rest of the roster to accept some of these new pieces and to bring some of these guys back, I can't help you. I can't help you. So can you buy a roster that wins a national title in 2025 and beyond? Potentially, but money is not going to be the end-all, be-all going forward, and I don't believe that was the case for Ohio State as well. Now, this show, The Hard Count, brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. The college football season has ended. If you were tailing us, phenomenal, or I'm sorry, whichever picks we ended up tailing. But we got a free square going out right now from the good folks at Prize Picks for conference title week. That's crazy. It's already conference title weekend. Conference championship weekend. Jaden Daniels, half a passing yard. If that hits, you're halfway home. Just to pair one more square and you're in good shape. We are with Prize Picks, and they've done a phenomenal job for us all college football season. Use code HARDCOUNT, $5 in lineups, gets you $50 in promo funds. All I would say is use this now, because in February, you may not be able to use that code. So use it now, get after it. Code HARDCOUNT, $5 in lineups, $50 in promo funds. And we appreciate y'all locking in. We appreciate Prize Picks bringing y'all the show today. It's bizarre, man, because the season ended, quote unquote, on Monday, and we're already kind of looking forward to 2025, and y'all have helped us do that. I asked y'all, what was your biggest takeaway from the 2024 season that will impact how you view 2025? We just addressed one of the main takes that we got really throughout that entire thread. Of you can buy a roster now, you can buy a national championship. Ohio State, their national title is invalid because they bought their roster, all those takes. But one take specifically came from one of y'all that said the SEC is up for grabs and everyone is trying to lock it down. To me, this was one I had to sit and think about for a minute, because you look at what happened from the postseason results and the preseason betting favorite. Like, Georgia was favored in the preseason and won the whole deal in the postseason, but I think they're onto something here. 3 teams in the last decade have won the SEC. Just 3 teams. primarily Georgia and Bama, LSU sprinkled in there. But this year, you didn't really get a truly dominant vibe from anyone, did you? Like, there were different moments throughout the season where you're like, hey, that could be the most dominant team. Hey, that's the most complete team. And then whoever you thought that team was, there's a pretty good chance if they were in the SEC, they ended up catching an L the next 1 to 2 weeks later. And so as we move forward and try to evaluate what the SEC is here going forward, I think there's a lot of folks that are very quick to say, well, the SEC is wide open because now everybody else can pay players too, right? That's kind of been the fun punchline for a lot of folks. To me, the SEC is just this dish that used to be a little bit bland, kind of knew what you were getting. You know, contrary to popular belief, I put more than just salt and pepper on my chicken, contrary to maybe some stereotypes. The SEC is just adding some spice here, right? I mean, with all these different things that have happened to the conference. They've added Texas and Oklahoma. They've done away with divisions. Nick Saban, the greatest coach of all time, who was responsible for a fair amount of those SEC championships, he has since done a great job on College Game Day. The transfer portal has been a massive, massive factor when it comes to the depth across the conference. So there's all these things now that I don't know you just point to one, but as we factor them all together, you look at the SEC and you're like, okay, that does make for a little bit more, I hate using this word in college football because I think it's overused, but it does make for a little bit more parity, if you will. So when you look to next season, there's just the spice level to me is only ratcheted up because of what the lay of the conference is going to be. Like those traditional powers we talk about, the Georgias and the Bamas, I mean, we'll factor in Texas because they played for it their first year in the conference. So, I mean, to have a 100% appearance rate when it comes to your time in the SEC championship, not a bad deal for them. All of them will have a new quarterback. A lot of these other schools, though, that are maybe some of the dark horse picks to win the conference or to appear in Atlanta, they've got some pretty exciting, high potential kind of cats at the quarterback position. And as much as we talk about line of scrimmage play in the SEC, and that totally deserves to be discussed, I really still believe that who you have at quarterback paired with the line of scrimmage is what makes the difference. Look at this past year. We have had our fair share of discussion around Quinn Ewers and what he wasn't this year. Same deal with Carson Beck. The dust settles. Both dudes were top 5 in the conference when it comes to passing yards. Translation, they were still good. Were they number 1 and number 2 respectively across college football as like the Heisman Trophy frontrunners? No, but they were still more than good enough to get you to Atlanta, Georgia. And for Georgia, the rest of the roster in overtime allowed them to win the SEC title in Atlanta, Georgia. So going back to the point I was making, it's still about quarterbacks, to me at least, in some large part. And you look at who these schools across the SEC have coming back as returning guys, from Lenora Sellers, who we have as the number 1 returning guy for us here on the hard, for myself here on the hard count. You have Garrett Nussmeier, who, spoiler alert, Cato, that's his number 1 guy returning next year. DJ Lagway, I mean, we put him in the top 10. I had a lot of folks in my mentions saying DJ Lagway should be much higher on this list. So there's so Nico Imaliava and the potential that he has. So there's so many schools now that I think have a quarterback that can make the difference for you, that can get you to Atlanta and can ultimately win you an SEC championship if you have the other things around them correct in the roster. So that's the first part of this question, or the first part of the take, rather, is the SEC is up for grabs. The second part of it, though, is where I think this discussion gets really, really intriguing. The second part of it is, well, everyone's trying to lock it down. Well, why are they trying to lock it down? What does that equate to if you lock down being the top dog in the SEC? I think optically is where I would see the most return there if I were to win the conference next year, if I were a Tennessee or a South Carolina, because even if it's only in a 1-year sample size, in a day and age where player mobility has never been higher, to be seen as the top school in the conference that has produced the most draft picks, that probably helps you when it comes to acquiring talent in the portal, and it definitely doesn't hurt you on the recruiting trail. It's a classic chicken or the egg situation. With Georgia and Bama, when they won it, it felt like every other year. Every year rather, they were top 3 when it comes to the on-3 team recruiting rankings. That was Georgia, that was Bama. Why? Yeah, because they're winning a lot. That's definitely a big deal. But they're winning a lot with a lot of guys now that go play on Sundays, which as a recruit, you have to believe is a massive part of where you end up deciding going to school. So that's the first part of this. But the other part of this is I don't really know that we see somebody lock down the SEC. Like Cade and I were talking before this, and the majority of those championships that were won by a Bama or a Georgia, not to say that they're in any way, shape, or form watered down, but in the new SEC, like this, the gauntlet you have to run to win it is so brutal every single year. Like Bama and Ole Miss both beat the champion in Georgia. Neither one of them played for the conference. Okay, Texas, they finished second in the conference. They lost to Georgia. They made it the farthest in the college football playoff. And they don't return their quarterback next year, as well as some other key pieces. The portal, to me, is taking away from what has made the superpowers in the SEC the superpowers. Like, you think about Georgia, you think about Bama, when they were reeling off those SEC championships, more notably, I suppose, Alabama, if you want to talk about frequency. What made them so different? What made them so much of a force to where you'd line up that first weekend of December, and it was like, hey, Alabama's going to be Alabama, and the Tide are going to roll today. Yeah, skill players for sure. That was a part of it. We mentioned quarterback play. That's a huge part of it. But more importantly, in the previous era, the pre-portal era rather, they just had so much depth. So much depth. And you hear everyone and their mama now that stands in front of a microphone, coach, personnel, or personality or otherwise, saying the depth in college football is starting to deteriorate. And it's hard to blame anyone. If you're in the SEC and you're a third-string guy, you play for an Ole Miss or a Georgia or whoever, guess what? You could probably go start somewhere else. And this isn't me telling you the SEC is the best conference. We've said actually on the show now multiple times, the Big Ten was the best conference in college football this year. But it doesn't change the fact that a lot of dudes with 4- and 5-star profiles commit some of these schools and then end up finding themselves their second year on campus not getting the playing time they think they should get. They're on the scout team or they're in the 2 deep. And it's like, hey, you know what? I can go play somewhere else right now and make some good money doing that. In some ways, more power to those guys. So you don't have the third platoon of Georgia or Alabama just looking like the same as the first platoon that they had on the defensive line rolling out there when everybody's dinged up in December. It's a long way to say next year will be awesome. The quarterback play will have a huge part in that. But as we move into a new era of college football where the depth across the board, not just the SEC, is going to be at a lesser level, I think it's going to be a world where nobody locks down the SEC. But with that being said, if you do, to you, a lot of spoils to that victor. I think quarterback play has been a fun discussion across this season for us. It's going to be a fun discussion for us across this offseason. I said this before on our national championship. I guess it was sort of a post-game show. But if you have something you want to see when it comes to our content on this show going forward, let us know. I mean, we're pretty accessible. Like Coach Prime, we ain't hard to find. You can hit us up on the socials, Instagram, Twitter, at JD PicKell. Hit us in the comment section. We do this show to service the college football sickos. So if you're a sicko, dial in, let us know what you want to see, and we'll make sure we do some more of that. Now, the transfer portal has more or less had the dust kind of settle on it as of right now, but I think it's important as we look at the quarterback position, how much of an impact that can make for you across the scope of what you are from one year to the next. John Mateer, Carson Beck, respectively, the top 2 quarterbacks and the top 2 players in the transfer portal. Obviously, Carson Beck commits to Miami, makes some waves because he's going to the NFL. U-turn, actually, no, we're going back to college. Coral Gables, the vibes are just fine out here. John Mateer goes with his offensive coordinator, Ben Arbuckle, out to Norman. And if you're an Oklahoma fan, you're like, okay, here we go. Got a guy at quarterback, got a mobile guy at quarterback that's got some experience, and you go watch his highlight tape from last year. I mean, 44 total touchdowns. I said it yesterday. I don't care who you score 44 touchdowns against, dude. That, to me, is more than enough to get excited. But the real intrigue of this discussion, I think, starts when you look at what happened from this previous portal cycle of quarterbacks. The top 5 guys, per us here at On3.com, 4 of them were in the college football playoff, one of them being a backup in Dante Moore. And the top dude was Cam Ward, who I don't think anybody is questioning what he brought to the table for Miami last year. Like, if Cam Ward was the only factor you had to evaluate for Miami, they would have been a college football playoff team. The unfortunate nature is Miami very severely lacked the defense, so Cam Ward gave you a net improvement of 3 wins for your football team, had you a win away from playing for the ACC and then going to the college football playoff. The bottom line is a portal quarterback can drastically change your season from one to the next. That's not saying a lot. But when you look at the college football playoff field, 6 of the 12 teams had a portal quarterback. You're seeing where I'm going with this. So when we look at Beck and Mateer and what their future looks like in Norman and Coral Gables, respectively, There's a similar level, I believe, of expectation for both sides and both fan bases, but the entry points for these two dudes could not be more different when it comes to the 2025 season. Like Carson Beck, I love the Netflix show Last Chance U. They were awesome when they did more of the football side of things. This is kind of Carson Beck's Last Chance U with the caveat of him Last Chance U to be a first-round pick. What he did last year at Georgia left a lot of folks questioning, wanting, and in a lot of ways, when he declared for the NFL draft, a lot of people are like, whoa, hang on. Now, great year the year before, and we've said that many times, but for Carson Beck, if you want to go be a first-round pick in the NFL, you have got to ball this upcoming season at Miami. There's no way around that. Now, for John Mateer, it's the other side of this. Like, he is coming from a school that played a G5 schedule last year in Washington State with his offensive coordinator, with his quarterbacks coach. This is his chance to play the big show. He is coming off a year where he went berserk. It's a chance now for him in the SEC, for a lot of folks that weren't staying up and watching games going down in Pullman, Washington, to go see what number 10 is all about. And to ultimately, I would have to believe, help his NFL draft stock when it's his time to go pro. The difference between the two situations, though, outside of their expectations and momentum, Carson Beck is showing up in Coral Gables post-surgery, having to get the elbow right, missing spring ball in a new system. John Mateer, the other side of that, is going, like I just said, with the same coordinator. He's not having to learn the playbook when he gets to Norman. He's having to teach the playbook. Like, he's the one organizing throwing sessions. He's the one probably sitting down in the film room with the receivers and the offense saying, here's what we got to do. Here's how we did it last year. Let me teach y'all how we're going to do this thing. That's huge. So, again, John Mateer maybe starting from a little bit of a maybe head start if you're going to compare him to Carson Beck, which isn't really the point of this segment. But I think when you talk about expectations, like I prefaced at the top of this thing, neither fan base is sitting here and saying, man, 8 wins, good for us. Awesome. 8-4, hey, clap it up. I mean, it's great. We only had a 2-win step back if we're Miami, and we improved by 2 wins if we're Oklahoma. Neither side is okay with that. And so as you try and craft expectations for Miami and Oklahoma as programs, like they both expect to, I believe, be in that discussion for the college football playoff. And I know how that sounds, maybe to the average Iowa fan or Iowa State fan or whoever you are, but that's just what comes with the territory when you have those logos. And I know there's going to be pushback around the Miami thing, especially because of the way they've come up short in the past in the Mario Cristobal era, but Miami just had a steady trend upward. Like, if I'm Miami, the exciting thing and the reason why I go land a Carson Beck is because we have pushed this boulder up the hill for the better part of the last 3 years. And people make jokes, people do the punchline thing on Twitter, and that's all well and good. But when you look at the facts, Miami's gotten better every single year. And last year, they were a few defensive plays away, a few defensive players maybe away from being a team that wins the ACC and plays for the college football playoff. They've pushed this boulder up the hill. The reality, though, they're not yet at the top of the mountain, so you still have to push that boulder a little bit more. And if you're not able to push it over to the top where that boulder can rest for a second and people know what Miami football is without a shadow of a doubt, it's going to fall back on you. If Miami won 7 games next year, is Mario Cristobal the right guy? Are we sure they're heading the right direction? All those things would be said. And that's obviously a bad vibe for Miami fans, but even more importantly, or as importantly, it's a bad vibe because of what it would mean for you on the recruiting trail. Because Florida, trending upwards. Clemson, trending upwards. Like the schools you compete with, both in your conference and on the recruiting trail, Florida obviously more recruiting trail, not in the conference, that's going to set you back a little bit here. So if they can push it up the mountain with a Carson Beck, they're going to have a chance to do something. And for Oklahoma, they're just trying to put jumper cables to the Brent Venables experience. Because the first year, it wasn't all that you had hoped it would be. Some growing pains. You get absolutely just dogged by the portal with all the pieces you lost when Lincoln Riley left. Second year, you won 10 games. Now, last year was what it was, and we've talked ad nauseum about the things that Oklahoma lacked within the roster to be able to get done what they wanted to get done. But John Mateer is the I hate to use this word, but he's the supposed savior of what Oklahoma football is right now. If you got a quarterback, you got a chance. We say that a lot on this show. Why? Because it's true. And so going back to expectations, as you try and craft expectations for both these teams and both these quarterbacks, if it's me, all I'm asking for, if I'm a Miami fan or I'm an Oklahoma fan, just don't be absent in any department. Like Oklahoma last year on the offensive line, they were absent. Sounds harsh, 12.5% sack rate, it's borderline absent. can't be absent this year. You can be better because of John Mateer and what he does running around, but you can't have a similar sack rate to that and expect to get to where you want to go. For Miami, can't be absent on defense. Absent is a harsh word to use because they would string it together in different quarters and halves, but if Miami, it just cuts down the points allowed per game by, 5 points, are they in the college football playoff? Do they get a chance to at least compete for the ACC championship? I don't know, but I think you feel a lot better about your chances. So if you can have a little bit of improvement on that side and not be absent on defense, then it goes back to who you acquired at quarterback. And it's tough to put the total college football playoff expectation on either of these guys in good faith, but here's what I will say. There's lesser quarterbacks than a Carson Beck and a John Mateer that have taken their team to the college football playoff. Now, what role they took in getting their team to the college football playoff is another discussion, but I would take John Mateer and Carson Beck over a Connor Cook. I take them over a Blake Sims. No shade to either of those dudes. And they were both asked to do different things and did it at a high enough level to get their team into the 4-team playoff. But I do think that when you talk about what they could mean and what they could be, if you do the right things around them, I truly believe both these guys are good enough to get you to where you want to go, which is ultimately a spot in the postseason. Now, Oklahoma's schedule is Squid Games level. Miami has got a work cut out for them early on in the year when they got to play Notre Dame. It's not going to be easy, but that's why you brought these dudes in, to elevate the rest of your roster, to elevate the rest of your team, and again, to get you to the postseason, get you over the hump if you're Miami, and to get you back to where you expect to be if you're Oklahoma. It's wild. A portal quarterback can make the difference for you. Sometimes that's all it is. Sometimes that's all you need. Arizona State with Sam Leavitt was a nice example of that this year. Quinn Ewers, all the shade he's gotten from this past season is fair, but his trajectory with what he did at Texas kind of lines up with Sark. Say what you want about Quinn Ewers, been in the college football playoff twice in the 4-team and the 12-team model. So, also, I can't believe I didn't lead with this. Both the quarterbacks that were in the national championship, both transfers in Ryan Leonard and Will Howard. But nonetheless, we press on into the rest of the show. Again, appreciate everyone tuned in live. Make sure you are subscribed if you haven't already. I appreciate this part of the year because, well, there's two reasons I appreciate this part of the year. One, from a content perspective. During the season, everyone's talking about the same thing. We're all giving you Georgia-Bama breakdowns. We're all giving you our reactions to the transfer portal moves or to the recruiting moves or to who won on Saturday. During this part of the year, though, yeah, there's some things to react to. For the most part, though, it's just us getting to talk ball with y'all. It is reaction season to your takes. It is giving you our takes. It's extrapolating a lot from a little. It's just we're kind of creating our own content together here because we're dialed into the sport year-round. That's the first part. Second thing I love about this is just what I said. The sickos that are dialed into college football during the month of January after the national title game, we're a different breed now. Okay, we're the folks that are staying up for Sickos Hour and it's 10:15 Eastern and you're watching Hawaii or whatever it is. So I appreciate the audience that we're able to have during this time of the year as well because I know, man, I know what it is. Y'all are cut from it and y'all are the real ones. Let's continue with our exit meeting series. Let's take a trip out to Knoxville, Tennessee, just a few hours up the road from us. What do you make of what 2024 was for Josh Heupel and the Vols? We'll talk about it now. First things first, make sure you are subscribed to the On3 YouTube channel. This is from a live show, so if you're watching live, thank you. Just one more subscribe plug. But if you're watching as a one-off video, make sure you're subscribed so you can watch the live show and get all the content we're doing here. It's college football year-round. So as I was saying, 2024 on paper, if you're a Tennessee fan, if you told me preseason, hey, you're going to win 10 games, you're going to beat Alabama, and you're going to make the college football playoff, you down? Say, yeah, I'm down right now. What are you talking about? Let's get this thing rolling. And also, it's worth noting the defense was the best it's ever been under Josh Heupel, so pair that with it. But as exciting as this year was, there's no way to say it was a bad season, but I think there's also a feeling for you if you're a Tennessee fan of, okay, what's the next thing? This is great, but we're not here just to make the playoff and have a first-round exit. Some of that's the human condition. We're always going to be wanting more until we win the national championship. But I do think for 2025, the way that Josh Heupel and Tennessee have trended since he's gotten there, there should be some sense of urgency. And urgency is not a bad thing. Pressure is privilege. But the way that I think about it, it's kind of like when you're trying to get your finals all mapped out and try to figure out what you need to get in your certain classes to get the GPA you want. Last year, Tennessee on defense, they had an A+ there. There's no way around that. They're one of the best run-stopping units in the country. They were phenomenal when it comes to points per game allowed. Like, that was an A+ unit. Offense, I mean, we could probably go back and forth about what letter grade you want to give them there. The defense made up a lot of what you were growing in offensively with Nico Iamaleava. And that's fine, because to some degree, that's football. You're going to have to ask your strengths to make up for your weaknesses. Everyone's got weaknesses. Everyone's got strengths. It's a matter of how much you make up for the other. But when I look to the future, is it really the best idea for anyone, Tennessee or otherwise, to bank on having an A+ defense every year? If you have it, great. But is it wise for us to say that's going to be the way that we go about our business? And if you watch Tennessee this year, it's a little bit of a lack of the firepower that you kind of optically think about when you picture what Tennessee football is. You picture Jalen Hyatt scoring 5 touchdowns against Alabama. You think about Hendon Hooker lighting up the box score. All those things are fair, and it's not that you have to have those to win, but that's kind of been Tennessee's MO, right? It's kind of been Tennessee's edge. You look at what Tennessee was this year compared to previous seasons, they had 4 wins this year. No such thing as a bad win, but they had 4 wins this year where they scored in the 20s. JD, we won the game. What are we talking about here? In the previous 3 seasons combined, Tennessee had 1 game where they scored less than 30 and won the football game. So my concern and my take here isn't being down on Tennessee because they had an awesome defense. Not at all. My sense of urgency here is, if I'm Tennessee, let's not lose the edge. That's kind of just good advice for life, right? Like, whatever your edge is, hone it, double down on it, be great at it. If you're the office funny guy, bro, bring some fire to the group chat. Be funny. If you're the social person in your friend group, let's organize some mixers here. Let's make sure we got everything going how it's supposed to go. Like, just hone your edge. And Tennessee's edge has been, when they got to the SEC, hey, we're going to score a lot of points. We're going to spread you out. We're going to run the football, which they did at a high level this year. But they did a great job, I think, really early on in Josh Heupel's time in Knoxville, being able to make up for what they lacked on defense or lacked in the trenches because of the style of ball they played. And so the excitement for Tennessee going forward is, what if they become that yes and team? Like, kind of what we thought they would be this year, right, with Nico. What if they're the team where, yes, we can score 40 on you, and we're awesome in the trenches? Yes, and we can have our quarterback go for 3,000 yards, have him 30 touchdowns, 5 picks. Like, yes, and is where Tennessee becomes a team where they can compete for the SEC, and I'll say this, I think it can make a run and win the national championship. That's a big thing to say. It's a very, very big thing to say, because there's a lot of things that have to factor into this roster. So that's nice in principle, but what would it actually take? I think when you talk about Nico, to me it's more chiropractor technique than it is anything else. Like, I don't think that Nico's like all that far off. What was the one thing that us and Tennessee fans said for the majority of this season, whenever they played someone that was of a Power 4 opponent, hey, where's the deep ball? Where's the drop the top on the defense, the Jalen Hyatt vibes, someone just downfield. They got caught lacking because our run game has been so great all year, so then we hit them over the top and make them pay. Still ran the ball well. Nico still had, I would say, a good year. We have him as a top 10 quarterback coming back next year. But there wasn't that oomph. There wasn't that yes and. There was the yes. There was the yes with how they ran the football, yes with how they played defense, but there was never that and. And the curious thing, the concerning thing for me is, I don't see the weapons as we sit here right now in January that make me think there is somebody that's going to help Nico elevate the way that I want him to elevate. Now, this is not an overall take on Tennessee for 2025. This is not me telling you what their win total is going to be. I think Tennessee's got a chance to be okay, but I need to see some of these receivers elevate. I need to see somebody step up, because for Joe Milton, that was the thing we said when he was playing quarterback. Hey, Joe Milton's doing his best out there, but I don't see anybody separating outside of a Squirrel White. Squirrel White is gone. Dante Thornton is gone. Brew McCoy is gone. You got some guys in that receiver room, but a lot, I think, when it comes to, there's a lot of unproven production, I would say, within that room. So if Josh Heupel and Tennessee do find a way to duplicate success, and they go win 10 games next year, 11 games next year, make the playoff, at that point in time, I'd be very, very nervous if I were the rest of the SEC because of what I just said. As we sit here right now in January, there's a lot on paper and a lot based on 2024 that we haven't really seen formulate. That's not a bad thing. I mean, everyone's got questions when we sit here at the end of January. Everyone's wondering what's going on with their roster and how they'll develop and trend and all those things. But I do think now if they get it done in a year where maybe the raw ingredients in January are less exciting than maybe they were this time last year, and he elevates Nico as he jumps into his second year as a starter, and the defense sustains success, and you're able to make up for losing a guy like a Dylan Sampson to the NFL, at that point, okay, it's going to be a year where similar to a Georgia, similar to a Nick Saban, Alabama, maybe not quite to that impact level, but if you get to that point where Tennessee duplicates success this year, that just makes it a Josh Heupel thing. At that point, you just have to deal with Josh Heupel every year and bank on the reality that he's going to find a way. Whether you're winning 4 games scoring in the 20s or whether you're scoring in the 40s, Josh Heupel is going to find a way to get the most out of his roster, and they're going to go win a lot of football games. So if that happens, all bets are off, and best of luck to everybody else. But there's a lot of urgency for Tennessee. There should be. But urgency means pressure, and pressure means privilege, and there's a good amount of pressure out there in Knoxville, and that's not a bad thing. I cannot wait to get out to spring practice in Knoxville at some point in time when that time rolls around again. We got to be out there last year, and they were just phenomenal to us, man. Great people running the show over there. Bill Martin, obviously Coach Heupel, and just a cool indoor, too, to be able to watch practice. So we'll definitely get out on the road a little bit this spring. Looking forward to bringing y'all with us. So speaking of us, there's, of course, not just me on this show. We got the man, the myth, the legend, multiple-time all Sun Belt safety, Caden Smith. And we got the hard count headlines, but today, the Huel headlines, if you will. Now, Huel bringing you the hard count headlines today. Brand new year, all about setting goals and actually hitting them. That's why we got the sponsor on board, Huel, spelled H-U-E-L, global, complete nutrition brand, trusted by millions. The Black Edition, ready to drink, is complete meal in a bottle, high in protein, low in sugar, packed with nutrients your body needs to perform at its best and produce some headlines. Right now, new customers can try it for 15% off plus a free gift using our exclusive code HARDCOUNT15. Again, we use this product. We appreciate this product. This product just sustains us on this side of the camera. So if you haven't yet locked in with Huel, again, code HARDCOUNT15 plus a free gift for new customers if you're able to use that code and get 15% off. Just a good deal. Again, Huel.com. Start your year off strong. Unlock a healthier, easier way to eat with Huel. Nutritionally complete meals in minutes so you can focus on what really matters. What really matters is, Cato, I might have given you a bit of an early cue there. How we living, man? We got some headlines to jump into. It's a beautiful Thursday. A lot has happened since Atlanta. Fired up to have you on, man. What's going on?
What's going on, JD PicKell? I'm happy to be here as always, and I'm happy to do these Huel headlines. I think we typically bring the juice with the hard count headlines. We have to take it to another level now that we are fueled by Huel and we're doing these headlines with the boys and girls over at Huel. So I'm excited, man.
A lot going on, dude. And you would think, okay, the season ends, kind of the dust settles, maybe a little bit quieter. Not the case. I walked in this morning, and you were kind of rubbing your hands together, like, hey, we got some headlines today now. What we got? What we got on tap, baby?
Yeah, JD, the college football season, one of the beauties of all of the changes of college football is it's kind of a year-round sport now. So I'm excited to see what these headlines look like now that we're in the off season. And to start things off, we have to talk a little bit of viewership. This isn't normally in our bag. We talk about the executives and the television numbers, but I thought this was pretty relevant. The College Football Playoff National Championship game between Ohio State and Notre Dame averaged 22.1 million viewers. That sounds like a lot, but this is a drop-off from the Michigan versus Washington title we saw last year that topped out at 25.05 million viewers. Do you make anything of these numbers? What do you say as far as the first expanded 12-team college football playoff, maybe missing the mark a little bit from viewership when it comes to that natty?
This surprised me. I thought, okay, you got Ohio State, massive brand. Notre Dame, you said this, arguably the biggest college football brand in the world, if you want to factor in the Rudy take there. Like, there's a lot to me that didn't totally check out about this, which leads me to believe as we expand the playoff, the attention span of us today in America is just so much lower than I would have to believe it used to be. I wonder if how long the playoff went, maybe not a negative thing, but I wonder if as that thing stretched on and you got to wait 10 days from semifinals to national title and, you know, you play the first game, I think, darn near a month before the national title on December 20th. There's a lot there where I'm like, I wonder how many people just kind of checked out as their team wasn't playing anymore. I think that probably was something to do with it because the brands itself were phenomenal, but that number surprised me. What was your takeaway?
Yeah, we were obviously on site there. The game was sold out. The vibes were electric. You would have never thought that there'd be any lack of juice when it comes to watching that game. And Herb Street was on the show with Andy and Ari and talked about how if you had to pick really two teams, these are two of the top picks when you have to pick a national championship matchup. So I was definitely surprised too, and I'm be very interested to see where this trends moving forward. And I think we can all agree that just knowing the nature of the people who back this sport and support this sport and give us the product we see every Saturday, and if this case Monday when you're talking about the national championship, if this continues to be a problem, we will definitely see changes. I don't know if that means expanding the playoff, making the playoff a little bit smaller. I don't know what it's going to take. Maybe moving it to a Saturday might be what it takes. A Monday is an interesting window for this game and something people have complained about for a while. But regardless, I don't think it's too much of a huge takeaway for this, but I'm curious to see if it keeps trending this way, what maybe the powers that be do to change this. But staying on kind of the national championship a little bit on the Notre Dame side of things, after 2 seasons as the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame, helping lead the Irish to that natty, Al Golden will now return to the NFL, specifically to the Bengals, where he spent 2 years before this as the linebackers coach. He's the defensive coordinator now. He will leave South Bend and go back to the NFL level. I think my big question for you here, JD, is this just maybe does this change at all how you feel about Notre Dame next season now that play caller on the defense side of the ball, a unit that was super dominant? Does that change your thoughts on them next year with Marcus Freeman having to find yet another coordinator?
Dude, it really doesn't, just because of, and maybe we're putting too much faith into what we believe to be true about Marcus Freeman, but I just think Marcus Freeman is a dude that continues to knock it out of the park at every single turn where they have to make an addition, whether it be the quarterback via the transfer portal, whether it be offensive coordinator and goes and grabs Mike Denbrock. Like, Marcus Freeman just continues to answer the bell whenever there is a situation where Notre Dame has got to bring somebody into the fold. Now, you and I were talking before we got on the air here. I think it is a maybe minute and a half search, however long it takes for Marcus Freeman to walk from his office down to Mike Mickens, the secondary coach for Notre Dame. You say, hey, you want the job? He says, yes, cool, awesome. We'll fire up the paperwork and we'll get this show on the road. I will say Notre Dame's defense, you would know more about this being so intricately involved on the defensive side of the football from your playing career. I was just an offensive guy, but it felt like what Notre Dame did defensively was maybe unique's the wrong word, but maybe specific to them with how often they brought pressure and played man coverage. I like the idea of keeping it in-house. Like, I think Mike Mickens probably more than earned his shot at this job, but I like the idea of keeping someone that's been around that formula, knows how it works, knows the ins and outs. Maybe it's not the Al Golden defense, it's the Mike Mickens defense, though, kind of in that same flavor, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's no secret that Notre Dame played a lot of man. They played a lot of cover zero. At times they got exotic with their blitzes, but man coverage is about Jimmys and Joes necessarily more than X's and O's. And they got hit in a lot of spots up front in their secondary, and they still were able to play that style of defense. So I think the Jimmys and Joes really showed up for Marcus Freeman's team this year when you talk about the injuries they had on both sides of the ball, really. But the depth definitely paid off on defense. I think Al Golden, he's going to be tested a lot more with that Cincinnati defense when you talk about trying to just play man coverage. That was clearly a problem for them this year, so I don't know how many of those principles he's going to be able to carry over. But I think my question for you, just another follow-up here. We talked about how Marcus Freeman's been aggressive in the portal market at quarterback, about getting good coordinators. Do you think maybe if this decision was made earlier, you see him gun for a guy like a Tom Allen who finds himself at Clemson, or maybe some of these other high-end defensive coordinators, or is him hiring from within maybe more of a circumstance where they've just played in the final game of the season, the latest game of the season, that market's a little bit smaller? I'm curious if that almost plays a factor here too when you just think about Marcus Freeman and how aggressive they'll continue to be going forward when it comes to staff and players now that they've shown the promise of being in a national championship.
It's probably one of those situations where you arrive at it and, yeah, the pool is smaller, but also you look back at the run you had and you look at what the defense did during that run. You say, okay, we clearly got something that's working here. We want to try and keep guys that are involved here. And also with the way the portal works too, Cato, with it going both ways, I wonder if you're not trying to keep some familiar faces to lead that defense forward, to try and keep whoever was maybe considering leaving if Al Golden left, if that were a world you're living in Notre Dame, to keep them on that roster going forward. I want to add this too, like Marcus Freeman, you and I have talked about this. There's something to just trusting a head coach and the side of the football that is their baby. Like Ryan Day, if he called plays again this past year for Ohio State, nobody would have been that upset. Steve Sarkisian, you always trust, okay, the offense is probably going to be okay. Marcus Freeman coming from the defensive side, I feel good about. I know he's not calling the plays for the defense, obviously, but for him, how much that matters to him, how much that's personal for him, I feel a good amount of confidence with whether it's Coach Mickens or somebody else. I feel like it'll be Coach Mickens, but I feel pretty confident in the direction they have with him being the head coach on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, there's no question there's something to your area of expertise on the side of the ball being a representation of you as a head coach and wanting to live up to that standard. You think of a game where if Notre Dame gave up a bunch of points, Marcus Stream would have a little bit extra emphasis, a little juice on that side of the ball. And he's a guy we believe in. He's first team all run through a brick wall. He's going to bring the energy and juice. So the defense is definitely probably one of the last things I'm worried about when we talk about Notre Dame moving forward. JD, for our last two headlines, these aren't necessarily news. I think it's news for some people who are some bettors out there. But because the season's come to a close, we have the favorites to not only win the college football playoff, but to also win the Heisman Trophy next year, a way too early kind of thing. And we're going to talk about the betting favorites to win the college football playoff, the national championship next season. No surprises, Ohio State at the top at plus 450. Then you have a two-way tie between Texas and Oregon at plus 650. Georgia at plus 700, plus 850. Penn State plus 1,200 for Notre Dame. We can go down the list and flash the list up there. You have Alabama, Tennessee, Clemson, and LSU rounding out that top list. When it comes to kind of projecting who's going to win the national championship this far away, what are your takeaways? Do you see some good value here? Do you maybe look at the 12-team playoff a little bit differently now as far as how this might shake out? What are your takeaways when you look at these early odds to win the national title?
Dude, my first thought is we're a bunch of degenerates in America. Like the national championship finishes up, and already we got lines on, hey, Ohio State, this is the early odds. It's like, dude, it's a year away. So the fact that Las Vegas is making money on all of us doing this, one, shout out to y'all. Two, we're probably still going to put some money down somewhere. You know who surprised me, Cato, was seeing Notre Dame at plus 1,200. We don't even know who the quarterback's going to be. And so some of this is a little bit, again, Las Vegas kind of doing what they do, saying, oh, remember that team that just played for a national title, that head coach, he's got a cool hairline and he's with cool uniforms, you love the logo, all those things. Maybe you should sprinkle some cash on them. And crazy things have happened, right? But with Riley Leonard, I'm assuming going to the NFL and potentially being the Steve Peanut Butter and Jelly Show or CJ Carr, that's very surprising, I thought, that they put them as high as they did. Now, we have Notre Dame in our top 5 when it comes to the way too early top 10, so we're not knocking it. But to see Vegas follow suit to some degree there, bit of an eyebrow raiser. I also see Tennessee at plus 1,600 ahead of Alabama at plus 1,800. That's going to take some getting used to in the post-Saban era. If Nico pops, again, there could be a lot of what-if factor there to our friends out in Knoxville. Then, of course, the usual suspects you mentioned. Anyone catching your eye, man? You kind of been on a heater. Like, people don't know, you kind of been on a heater, and it's very subtle. It's very low profile. You don't brag about it. You let your actions do the talking. You've been hot. So what's Cato's play here? You got something you're laying down?
Yeah, I will admit I've been on a heater. It's been a good year for fantasy football, for these bracket challenges, for some bets, but not to toot my own horn. But I think the future's definitely a league I don't dabble into too much. I did do a CFP future. I highly recommend if you think a team's going to make the 12-team field, you can get some odds on that early. So I'll be on those again as soon as possible. I put an early one in for Oregon making it, Ohio State and Georgia. It just felt like a lock.
Last year?
Yes. Okay. So that's make those as soon as you can. I think Notre Dame is the takeaway here. I think Notre Dame is the play. Just because we've talked about in the past, their path to the college football playoff alone, I think, is making them worth putting a little bit of money here if you wanted to make a future play. This is a team that keep reiterating it, does not have to play in the conference, doesn't have to play in conference title weekend. That's their bye. And it seems like with Marcus Freeman at the helm and just their schedule year in and year out, they're fully cool hosting a college football playoff game in that first round in that 5 to 8 range. And I think they can kind of put themselves in the playoff a lot of years, many years to come. And that's kind of the first step of winning a national title, right, is being in the dance. I like the value of Notre Dame too. And I think that's something to consider when you talk about all these teams and their paths to make it. I would have to take a harder look at the schedules. I think the SEC scheduling might play a role in who I think is going to make it. We know Georgia's going to have a hard schedule again. We know Tennessee has maybe a little bit of an easier path yet again, just flipping their home and road. So I think that might be my favorite kind of play when we're talking about this as far as who could potentially win the national title game. But nonetheless, I think this is, again, long shot odds. These will continue to change for many months going forward. And yeah, it'll be exciting to see. Already thinking about, I think with your tweet before when people asking about their biggest takeaways, someone said, my takeaway is that I'm already excited for next season in 2025. We'll get talking about these matchups in week 1 and all the storylines that are going to be there for next season. But regardless, I'm definitely jacked.
Dude, am I taking crazy pills to love Clemson at plus 1,800?
It's not crazy at all.
You got LSU to open. You'll obviously play South Carolina. Go to South Carolina, that is. Outside of that, Miami, Florida State's a massive question mark. You get them at home. got to go to Georgia Tech, you got to go to Louisville. Like, I don't see a ton of just like, oh, those are gimme losses for whoever Clemson's playing. Like, Cade Klubnik, we love him maybe more than most. The weapons, like, just when we thought Dabo Swinney and Clemson falling off a bridge, thought they were done, and they win the ACC this year, and they're using the portal, and they're hiring outside of their staff. Like, I love Clemson at plus 1,800. I just want to make sure that's out there for the masses.
That's a great one, too, because, again, it is about the path. We have a colleague, Trey Yanity, producer of the Inside Scoop, who's very much dialed in on Clemson, thinking that their game is pretty much a 2-game season. I mean, they can lose to LSU in that opener. They can lose to South Carolina in that finale. They got to win the ACC, and they're in according to the current model. And they could do that pretty easy with just winning those ACC games that matter the most on their conference. They stubbed their schedule, rather. They stubbed their toe against Louisville this year, kept it pushing. They're in the ACC title game. They win it. They're in the playoff. When you talk about quarterbacks you trust, Cade Klubnik's definitely one of the top ones in the conference, so I think they could take a step this year. You talk about the defense. I think that's a great play, too. So maybe Notre Dame, Clemson, maybe we sprinkle a little bit on those guys and see what it looks like for them. But I think for this next list, when you're talking about odds, it's kind of a stay away for me. It's a hard one to see, but we have the Heisman Trophy odds out early again. Garrett Nussmeier leading the pack at plus 900, followed by Arch Manning at plus 950. Then you have a three-way tie at plus 110, Cade Klubnik, Drew Aller, Nico Iamaleava. Then you get rid of quarterbacks. You have Jeremiah Smith sneaking in there as a non-quarterback, plus 1,700. Then after that, you have Carson Beck, Julian Sand, Dante Moore, and Lenore Sellers. Are there any early Heisman favorites you like? We talked about your favorites as far as the top 10 quarterbacks that will be playing next year. I know that some of that overlaps here. Do you have any Heisman favorites, though, when you look at this list and these odds?
A lot of thoughts. First, just seeing Jeremiah Smith's name in that top 5.
Awesome.
And then also when we stood next to him at Media Days, I'm like, that dude is a freaking created player. So it's tough to see that in person, but then you're also like, okay, a true wide receiver that's not playing both ways. Shout out Travis Hunter winning the Heisman Trophy. It hasn't happened since Devontae Smith, and even that year was a bit of a quirky year with the whole COVID situation. Looking at Cade Klubnik at plus 1,200, dude, segues perfectly. He, to me, from last year to this year, is that kid in middle school where you leave for the summer, you come back, and he's grown 4 inches. He has a lower bass in his voice, and he's got a little bit of facial hair. Like, he totally just changed, in my opinion, at least who he was, not physically given that comparison, but what he was as a quarterback the second year in Garrett Riley's system. He also got more help, like all those things based on the schedule as well we just talked about. Cade Klubnik would be someone I would definitely sprinkle a little change on as we sit here in January. Like plus 1,200, it's not bad odds. With him having the third best odds right now, but just what those are on their own. I love where Cade Klubnik stands going into 2025. And I'm a little bit nervous how much I like it, Cato, because it's one of those things where you end the season, you have a couple of takes that you feel good about, but as you get more time to sit with them, you just fall more in love with them. And I don't know if that's a safe thing to do here in this Heisman conversation. Like, I don't know if I want to just have 3 months now where I just tell everyone how good Cade Klubnik's going to be, and then they roll out there against LSU, and I look foolish. You know?
Yeah, I think the LSU game is a big part of it. I think if you're bullish on Nussmeier or Cade Klubnik, you might want to hop on those odds early because they're about to face head-to-head, and whoever wins that matchup, their odds are going to change immediately. I love that you brought up Jeremiah Smith. I can't think of anything more fun for college football than having yet another season where a quarterback doesn't take home the Heisman. You talk about an Ohio State team. Talked at the beginning of the show how loaded they are, how much money they spent on that roster. It's just by nature of the beast not going to be as loaded next year. Maybe that means Jeremiah Smith has an unreal Randy Moss-esque type season where he finds himself in New York and can maybe take home that award. I think the quarterbacks who haven't started are just such a hard thing to get a gauge on. You talk about Dante Moore and a Julian Sand. Those are just complete stayaways for me. And really, this exercise is a stay away for me. I think the best way to vote and pick for a Heisman, if you want to put a bet on it, is watch the first couple weeks of the season, then try to picture who you think is going to run with it and then go there. There's still good value. You're still going to get plus money there if you wait for the first 4 weeks of the season and maybe follow some trajectory going forward. But, man, when you see a guy like Lenore Sellers at the bottom of this list, and you have the Cam Newton comps and you say, hey, maybe this is a year where he can put the team on his back and is physically imposing and can have a Cam Newton-esque type of year. South Carolina wins some games and finds himself in the SEC title picture. I think from an eye test and talent standpoint, Jeremiah Smith and Lenore Sellers are the ones that catch my eye the most because I could just see them, as we say on the show a lot, transporting their teams, having physically impressive performance and winning the optics game as far as weekly being a highlight reel, weekly being the most potentially popular player in college football. I mean, Lenore Sellers, my favorite stat from him last year, in that game against Clemson, he had more yards after contact than yards rushing in general because he was making so many people miss in the background. If that becomes a weekly show, I could just see the energy he brings to the stadium and the energy he brings to college football maybe taking off.
It's curious, too, because as the Heisman is, I think, evolving with the way that college football is evolving, it used to be very squarely best player or quarterback on the best team. Go ahead and bet them early on in the year, and you'll ride that out and probably make some cash money. Last couple of years, I know this is the first year of the college football playoff, but like even last year with it's 2 years now, gosh dang, Jaden Daniels being on a 9-3 LSU team and him winning the Heisman. And then this past year with Travis Hunter winning the Heisman and then Ashton Jeanty finishing second in the Heisman Trophy. Like I think we're sort of entering into this world now where as long as you are playing at the highest level in front of enough people and enough juice is around your school, maybe not a guaranteed playoff team, but like Colorado, they were in the mix there at the very end and didn't make it, but still Travis Hunter deservingly so got his Heisman Trophy. So I'm very curious if we see that trajectory and that trend for this award, because I think that's the right way to do it. Like I'm here for the impact discussion around best player, best team and all that, but I really think as much as we can make it about the best player in college football, which the award is supposed to be given to, I'm here for that. That's a good thing. I hope that continues.
Yeah, I agree, JD. I think it's great for the sport, and I think in that same vein, we talked about it a little bit before. We obviously only see the top 10 list here when you look at those odds. But if we wanted to sprinkle, like not even a dollar amount, like a cent amount on something, if college football is going to continue to keep trending this way, what is Caleb Downs' odds looking like? What are the odds he maybe pulls a Honey Badger-esque year out of his behind and starts hitting people, forcing fumbles, scooping scores? He's returning punts. Like I mentioned, Ohio State's going to be down this year as far as a talent standpoint compared to what they had last season. There were some talks when he committed to Ohio State, got to Ohio State, that maybe he'd play some offense. That was clearly shut down just because of how elite that offensive side of the ball was. Maybe some injuries, some lack of production there. All of a sudden we see Caleb Downs having a two-way season, a la Travis Hunter, a la Honey Badger. If I had to make a flyer, maybe that'd be a pick there too. But nonetheless, didn't think I could get excited about the 2025 football season. Then these odds come out and we're talking about it and we're already juiced for it. So it doesn't get much better than that. But before we keep moving forward and talking about the 2025 season, I know, JD, you wanted to talk about our trip to the national championship. We were there for media days. We were there the whole weekend for the game. Wanted to just give the people some insight, share some of the sweet B-roll we have cut up from the weekend, and just talk about some of the national championship takeaways you had from being in Atlanta in the house.
Yeah, dude. First off, how many cents we putting down on Caleb Downs?
Like sprinkle 50.
We throwing a quarter, two quarters,
some pocket change.
Let's go, dude. Hey, it all counts. It all counts the same. I love that, dude.
Why not?
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I think you said it perfectly. Before getting to do this job, I would always really appreciate anytime someone I would listen to on a college football podcast or otherwise that would just kind of share what their experience was like going to cool places at that point in time I wasn't able to go to. And so for us getting to go to the national championship and then they call it work, like you expense your gas to get out there, just the whole thing is hysterical. But being there was phenomenal. Like the game itself was electric, and we've talked about that a lot. But even the things leading up to the game, there's a point in time, I guess it was the Monday of the game, Cato and I looking for somewhere to eat before the game, walking around. I said to him, I was like, it feels like we're in the Midwest right now. Like the weather is in the 20s or the teens, and we are surrounded by Buckeye fans, surrounded by Notre Dame fans. I was surprised at how, maybe surprised the wrong word, but like I was blown away in some ways, but which is more than surprised. The Ohio State faithful traveled. Like I did not think it would be the divide that it was. And it was a full-on takeover from the Buckeyes in Atlanta. It was one of my first takeaways, Cato.
Yeah, it was a really cool environment. We can talk about all the inner workings that surrounded the game, before the game, after the game, and all that. But when you talk about a fan base perspective, when we do this job and we're in the studio all the time, we're cranking out work, you might lose touch, lose a pulse with the actual fan bases. But seeing, Lord knows where these people traveled from to get to Atlanta and support their teams. There was a crowd of fans from both sides at media days. There's crowd obviously at the game. The game was cool. It almost had a Cotton Level Bowl feel. I've never been to that game against Texas and Oklahoma, but one end zone was Ohio State and one was Notre Dame predominantly. Yeah. Ohio State won the matchup as far as around the full stadium, but it was so cool seeing the opposition trying to score at certain points of the game and having the fans cheer. You have dudes who look like they've played on or rooted for Notre Dame since Lou Holtz was there. They're trying to watch their team win a natty. Same with Ohio State, just another desperate fan base. Was so cool seeing that, seeing the different jersey pulls, dudes wearing Ezekiel Elliott jerseys out there. Just it was a fun time. It was a great time. The fans couldn't be more thankful for them for making this thing go. But they were definitely the engine of the weekend, I think, as far as the vehicle and the horsepower that we saw this weekend from a reaction standpoint from these two fan bases.
That was the thing. The jerseys from both. We saw Chris Olave. You saw J.K. Dobbins jerseys. You saw
Brady Quinn jersey.
Brady Quinn jersey. Manti
Awesome
Te'o
pulls.
jersey.
Awesome pulls, man.
It was like those are some deep cuts. Like you've seen some games if you're rocking any of those jerseys that we just mentioned. So the way the fans traveled, showed out, and then also the post game. Obviously, you and I are down there on the field afterwards. But as we make our way down, seeing the emotion from the Buckeye fans of tears and not shock, but definitely awe of just the moment that it was. You could tell, too, how much it meant to that fan base. That was also a really cool thing to see up close and personal. It just kind of reminds you why we love college football so much. Yeah, the playoffs changed. Yeah, there's NIL in the portal. And, yeah, there's different things that come with college football now. But you couldn't have told anybody wearing scarlet and gray that night that there was anything less valid or different about the national title they got.
No, and the post-game celebration was a thing within itself. You talk about being on the field when the confetti drops and seeing the culmination of all these guys' work finally coming into fruition and being at the very top of the game. Such a cool thing, man. I mean, I know you came from the Ivy League level. I played the Sun Bowl. I won a Sun Belt championship, and that was a great time. I wouldn't trade those memories for the world, but I couldn't imagine what it takes to do that at the very, very highest level until being on the field and seeing the emotion pour out of these guys as far as being there. You see so many different stories from these guys, too. You talk about a Jeremiah Smith where this is his first ever college football season, and this is all he knows. You talk about the captains of this team, the JTTs, the Jack Sawyers, being there, working year after year trying to get to this point, not being able to get over the Michigan hump, still not being able to get over that hump and still make it to this stage. You talk about all the transfers who this is their first year with Ohio State and they had their fingerprints all over this one. The Quinshon Judkins game, you could call this. You have Will Howard balling out. Just so many different stories all culminating to this team that had guys who haven't played with each other coming together and getting this win. It was awesome to see, and the Ryan Day reaction was awesome too. This fan base has gotten its level of flack for how they've treated Ryan Day through social media, through the media, the narrative surrounding him. Dudes were just so happy for this guy, and you couldn't help but be happy for this guy being in person for this game too.
I want to go rapid fire, then get to a story really quick. I can't believe I didn't lead with this. We both agree, Jeremiah Smith, freak show, true 225. The broadcast never does justice how massive he is. Other thing I was going to say, the stars were out, bro.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we saw Travis Scott. We
Anthony
saw
Mackie.
Joe Montana.
Joe Montana was there. I saw Jerome Bettis on the sideline, Patrick Peterson. There was a lot of college football royalty and just royalty in general in the house. It was an awesome vibe. The pregame vibes was probably my favorite part of the game, just walking around, seeing those different celebrities that were there, seeing the players warm up and how they prepare. Every team prepares differently and players prepare differently. It was awesome definitely to see the pregame vibes. You couldn't take the guys off the field when it came to pregame. It was an awesome time.
I'm glad you said that because I was going to blow past that thought before we got to this story. Nobody at the national championship game, whether you are an independent creator or whether you work for one of the large networks, nobody is too big for that moment pregame, which is just so cool. You can tell everyone, maybe they go to games every weekend or maybe it's their job to work in college football, but like everybody in that moment is a kid on Christmas morning seeing Ohio State run out. The pregame music, like just the atmosphere in itself is so large. So to see other people that we work with also in awe and enjoying, like that was a really cool moment and just kind of makes you grateful to do what we do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it was cool just seeing the stadium fill up throughout the pregame because we get out there, we're sickos, man. We get out there as early as we can. We're there when it's an empty stadium. There's a couple of Ohio State fans. The band is still out there tuning their instruments, and then just a minute after minute, feel the fans coming in, the energy starts to get up and up, the players start warming up, the celebs start coming out. It was a cool moment, man. I cannot lie. I almost enjoyed the pregame as much as the actual game, and that's saying a lot because you and me are sitting next to each other when Notre Dame scores that last touchdown, and we're like, uh-oh. Like,
shoot, are
the Fighting Irish about to do something crazy here?
A photo finish, and people were leaving the stadium.
Oh, man.
People had filed out before that.
It would have been a Miami Heat Spurs situation where dudes would have been coming back in the stadium to see what went on. But, no, it was a special weekend for sure. You talk about the size of these guys, too. I mean, we're at media days, and you see the edge rushers like JT Tuimalau, and you see Jack Sawyer on TV, and I was really impressed with their speed. But then you see them in person, and these dudes are massive. They're huge. They're bigger than any player I've ever played with. I felt like at App State, probably same for you in the Ivy League. They're a lot of physically impressive dudes. Pat Coogan's a monster. So just being able to watch those teams duke it out and watch their weekend culminating to that game was special, and every little detail it seemed like was special as well.
So we have still some folks tuned in that are the sickos as we kind of wind this down. I can't believe I didn't say this at the very beginning of this segment. Cato, you went viral, bro. You went like everyone's seen the snap or not the snapshot, but the video of the cart with Ryan Day and Will Howard on it, and they run not full speed, but pretty close to it into that like concrete wall. And if you go back and watch that clip, stay watching the cart for a second, and you'll see Cato just pass through the clip really quickly. My side of it was we're about to film something on the field. We're getting something else for the camera. Cato goes back to the media room, and then you walk back out, and you're like, dude, the Ryan Day's cart just like smacked the cement. I was like, I didn't really like register what you had told me at that point in time. Tell the people at home the play-by-play for you with the moment where Ryan Day's car just goes darn near full speed into a brick wall post-national title game.
Yeah, so we're on the field after the game. We're about to shoot our reactions. If you haven't watched them, make sure you check those out.
Shout out.
It's died down a little bit. The vibes have calmed down a little bit, but there's still some fans in the stadium. And all of a sudden you hear the fans start erupting a little bit more. And you look over, and it's the cart that has Ryan Day in it and the players that will speak at the press conference on the game making their way to the press conference. So we all saw that on the field. We saw that happen. Amid that, we had a little bit of audio issues. I was going back to the media room to get some different equipment. On the way there, I hear a little bit of a commotion, a skirmish a little bit. I'm like, what's going on here? And I see this cart just like on the wall. It looks like it got T-boned or something, and someone left the scene. But the cart was down bad. I felt very bad for the girl who was driving it. She was a little embarrassed, clearly. And Will Howard and those guys were just laughing at it. Jack Sawyer was having a good time with it. They got off the cart. If you see me in the video, I flew by this scene. I was on a mission. I was on a mission to get us our audio equipment. I didn't have time to really take in that moment. But our other producer for the Andy and Ari show, River Bailey, tells me on the way back, hey, we have it figured out, like, never mind. So on the way back, I got a really good look at the cart. And you can go to my Twitter right now at Caden__Smith if you want to see what the cart looked like.
Yes.
Front axle's cooked. That cart might still be in that hallway right now because the injury report is doubtful. That cart will not be back in the game anytime soon. It needs some roadside assistance. But yeah, I was there mere moments after the accident, I guess we can call it, in a part of history, man. You never know when the moment's going to be yours, but I had my 1 second of fame there at the Natty.
Dude, I love that clip so much because you go back and look at it, and just like you said, go check it out on Cato's Twitter. That car is like the axle is broken. Like it's not recovering. Yeah, shout out. We miss you already. But Cato in the clip does not care about what, like, my guy is on a freaking mission. Talk about a program guy through and through. He's like, Ryan Day, sorry you just got into a car accident. I got somewhere to be. We got a job to do. Main thing's the main thing. So shout out to you, bro, for just, keeping the tunnel vision in that moment. I would have probably like texted you and said, hey, bro, I'll be back in an hour. Something just went down in the hall.
One foot in front of the other, man. One foot in front of the other. It's so funny that I told y'all about the moment on the field before it was viral. And then afterwards we see it blow up, and it's funny. And then, of course, I'm in the video. So big win for the brand, man. We were in the eye of the storm, and I think they should like take the cart and like enshrine it in some kind of like museum, College Football Hall of Fame right down the street. Just take the cart, get it over there, tow it over there maybe. And it's a funny part of history. I think we have game balls, game worn stuff. There needs to be a section for like the viral moments of history, and that's an early one when it comes to this new era of social media and the national championship. So good vibes, JD. Always good chopping up with you about the headlines, and great weekend in the Natty, man. Can't wait to keep it going this season. I know we have one more word for our sponsor before we head out of here, but likewise to the people.
Again, Caden Smith, just absolute workhorse this weekend, dude. Week into the weekday, but yeah, phenomenal. But everything that you see on the YouTube channel happening always, but especially in Atlanta, getting it dialed in. One more thing I'll say before our sponsor here. We get back, it's like 2:30, 3 a.m., and typically my thought post-national title game is, okay, we're going to do our live show. As we do our live show, we'll find a setup, and we'll go from wherever we go live from. Had Wi-Fi issues throughout the week, so we're like, man, do we really want to test it? look at Caden. I'm like, hey, man, do you want to just try to do our live show and premiere it on the channel? Like, it's probably like 2 a.m. Hey, Caden, are you down? No pressure. He's like, I don't see why not. Let's do it. So for Cato, one, just making it happen, technically, and then also just being an absolute dog and getting us on the air and getting our show out for y'all on that Tuesday morning post-Natty. Also, shout out to our friends bringing all the hard count today, Axia Time. Axia Time is the official timepiece of both the college football playoff and the Heisman Trophy. Y'all have heard me talk about these timepieces a lot. Great designs, especially for the college football playoff. National title game just happened. If you're an Ohio State fan, got some custom designs for you over at axiatime.com, excuse me. And with the purchase, you'll get some confetti from the post-game celebration in Atlanta when you buy one of those watches. So, again, if you're an Ohio State fan, might want to lock that in. You can do so over at axiatime.com. Use code HARDCOUNT for 10% off your order at checkout. Again, axiatime.com, 10% off your order with a watch that tells so much more than time. Appreciate y'all being dialed in. Again, a phenomenal week for us, starting on Monday in Atlanta and finishing up here on this Chop It Up Thursday. Got a lot to get into here going forward. The show does not stop. The content does not stop. I know y'all do not stop when it comes to your passion for college football. Phenomenal part for us. We're wired the same. Our passion doesn't stop either. So, for Cato on the ones and twos, as always, for myself, JD PicKell, we appreciate y'all. We love y'all. We're going to keep this party rolling. We will see y'all.